little bit. Like, what are you guys up to these days? What are you working on?
We've done our fair share of projects at Low Watt. A lot of different kind of stuff. Now we're actually in two separate cities, so we're kind of both of us are focusing these days on sort of expanding our home studios, because I think that's sort of with COVID and stuff, I think that's maybe the way things are going to be going for a while. And yeah, so we're sort of starting to figure out how to do that and collaborating on remote sessions and stuff like that, collaborative sessions in Pro Tools, and so we've done a couple records recently with some like local Savannah bands and out of town projects and stuff. For a while, the stuff that we had in Low Watt we didn't really do a lot of Savannah bands. It was mostly out of town, just word of mouth stuff, or writing to bands and wanting to work with people. And but like now it's people that are coming in that are kind of more local and stuff like that. But and that was up until recently, and now so we're just kind of trying to push forward and figure out our next move. Me and Bren just sort of filmed together, which was kind of a new thing. It was a friend of ours' feature-length film, and that was like a really fun process. So we're doing that. We just finished the So Sure EP, and just kind of like, trying different stuff. We do noise generators, so pedal demos and stuff. Bren's kind of handling that mostly right now. And so we're just trying to stay current and do stuff and, take also projects as they come.
Still in progress on a Fragile Tomorrow record.
Yeah, we are doing
just kind of on pause at the moment, but
yeah, because most of our stuff is done, and we did some of it from home, but most of it from Low Watt. But the other guys in the band, or two of the other guys in the band, don't have home setups, so it's a little harder for them to do stuff. So once this all kind of
got to get them some home setups, man.
I know.
This is. I just was talking about this last night, like with John, actually, who you introduced me to.
Yeah,
it's just at this point, like every musician has to have a home setup. It's not an option. It's not an option anymore. It's an obligation. Like, it's part of being a musician in 2020. But
for sure,
even before COVID, like, you got to have some way to record, because even if you're not producing yourself, you could collaborate with the producer. You could just send like a backing vocal or something.
Yep.
There's always something to be done at home.
Oh, it's hugely important, and it opens up a lot of different possibilities for people as well to like be part of different things. I mean, like the So Sure thing probably wouldn't have gotten off the ground so easily had it not been for the capabilities that we had, just with everything going on, and that was sort of like the realization of a long dream and idea of Brendan and I, and so it was. I mean, it really was just like, hey, we have stuff. Let's just let's start this and see where it goes. And it's even for me to be through all of this, to go downtown to the studio. It's hard because of COVID and not wanting to be out in public a lot. It's hard because I have a 10-month-old daughter and all that kind of stuff. So it's, being able to have something at my house, it opens up possibilities of like, schedules open up and suddenly you're making a record a lot easier than having to schedule studio time. So it really can, it's a great thing, and it can make a lot more creativity more accessible, I think.
Amazing. So how does songwriting work for you guys? Like, how does it begin? How do you flesh it out? Just get into it,
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot over the years. Like, Sean used to kind of write the songs fully formed by himself, but the last since we, I think, kind of started producing together, we also started writing together a lot. So Sean still takes care of, pretty much all the like melody and lyrics and stuff like that, but I'll come in with musical ideas sometimes, or he'll come in with musical ideas, and we'll just kind of, right now, since we're separate, the writing process is kind of like, here's this little voice memo of a riff or something, what do you think? And then we'll send it back and then be like, oh, I have this other thing that might kind of work with that. And sometimes we're, combining different parts into a song, or just kind of fleshing out ideas. So, and with this new project, the So Sure EP, a lot of it was kind of like one of us sort of taking the reins and sort of trying to arrange a song, and then just kind of sending back and forth. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of it is just kind of us bouncing ideas off each other.
And I'll add on to that too, because I think it does change a lot. Like, And with certain projects, like for example, the record we did with our friend Matt, which came out in February, I believe. It's called The Mourner's Manual. It's a great record. That was like one of those things that Matt is somebody. I think what's his website? MattMcGrew.com. I think MattMcGrewMusic.com, something like that. But anyway, if you go check it out because it's a great record. But he kind of came into that, like, we'd worked together before on stuff, but he came into that pretty like empty. He just kind of didn't really have much of anything in the way of ideas, like little tiny ideas, but no real vision for where to take stuff. And he came in and was like, I want not just for you guys to produce and engineer this, I also want this to kind of feel like a band, even though it's my thing, and like, let's write together and stuff. Excuse me. So it kind of like gave free rein, I think, to us to sort of like employ some of our songwriting, like, that muscle a little bit. But I think it kind of does go hand in hand, though, in some ways. It really depends on the project. But a lot of the songwriting that we do really comes about in the studio.
That's true.
Like, I mean, the whole record, the first record that we made at Low Watt with our band was was written entirely in the studio and built. Yeah. Like it was one of those records that was just built up, where we were, I would have an idea and just record it and then kind of keep playing through stuff until we landed on a couple of different things, and then we'd find an arrangement. We'd kind of like splice that together and see if it worked. It was just built up. And so like with Matt's thing, it was one of those things where, for example, he brought in a couple of songs that were like older songs that he'd written that were kind of in this Americana alt country vein, and he was like, I want to do something with these because I've never released them, but I don't really know where to take them. And so we sat down with him and we said, well, what if you kind of turn this into like this alt country song into like a new wave thing, like the Killers or something like that, like a modern new wave thing. And a lot of that has to do, you're using the same like sensibilities when you're producing in that respect as you would if you're writing songs. So it was cool because there was no wrong way of doing it. He didn't have a set idea. It was just kind of like, let's just try stuff out. And that's really how the songwriting process goes. But sometimes Brendan will just get on a drum kit and just play a groove. And Brendan's an incredible drummer, and in addition to being an incredible guitar player. So when we were writing our last record, the band's last record, it was like getting on a drum kit and me getting on a bass or guitar and just like finding stuff, and then recording on our phones and then working it out later. It's like very much all in the same like breadth. It's like production and songwriting. I feel like
that's exactly what I was going to ask. It seems like they're tied together.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I find the same thing is true for me also. Like for me, like the production, like the world of the DAW is my canvas to figure out how I'm going to write a song. And I mean, I've written songs on guitar and piano also, but like it works better for me, at least in the DAW.
Yeah. Well, and definitely. I think with Brendan too, being so effects heavy, and you can speak to this, like a lot of the stuff that we're doing for the new thing, a lot of those bands, well, no, not a lot of them, probably all of them, all of the stuff that you hear from any like shoegaze related or dream pop related band, I don't think a lot of that stuff was like written on an acoustic guitar and then they added effects later or tried to figure out the sound. I think it was all informed by effects and informed by what was happening sonically. And I feel like we've gotten to that point too, where it's all informed by the sonics and not really in a tradition, which is why sometimes it's really hard to like do acoustic shows because it's like really hard to play a lot of this stuff acoustically because it doesn't really it's not served well in that capacity. We've made it work, but like when Brendan has an idea, it's usually because he's got a certain kind of chain happening that is a specific sound, and then we write something around that. It's all, you're totally right. It's all like centralized now. Yeah. Where, everything you're doing sonically and in terms of production and the sounds that you're getting, it just informs all of it. It's all one thing now, which I love. That's the thing about studios that I want to like. Sometimes I want to shout from the rooftops to like younger bands. Like use this space. Like it's here. Like it's not just hitting record. You can do so much in a studio, and that's probably the biggest thing we've learned, and that's the biggest thing that's informed the writing process, I think, for both of us is production and songwriting can be in the same, they can go hand in hand, and it makes for a more interesting product.
Yeah. So how do you stay objective when you're self-producing your own songs? Like how do you know if something is like up to par?
That's hard, and I've thought about this a lot. I know that for Brendan and I, we kind of keep each other in check.
Yeah, totally.
Nice.
Yeah, it's because, like, for example, I made a solo record, and I like Brendan engineered it, but I pretty much self-produced it. Ted co-produced a couple of songs, but pretty much self-produced it and played most everything on it except for drums. And even in that particular situation, it'd be really easy for really easy for me to just get off the rails and start like doing stuff that I was just like I'd listen back later and be like, this is not working, like it's just overcrowding things or whatever. So even when it's not like in that situation where Brendan wasn't co-producing, we have this relationship where he can be like, well, maybe you should try this instead. And I feel like maybe I'm the same way with arrangements. I don't know.
Yeah,
if you'd agree.
We sort of balance each other out, and I think Sean is definitely a little bit more like arrangement and melody focused, and I'm a little bit more focused on sonics.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think we kind of keep each other in check in those ways. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard to kind of check yourself when you're self-producing, but I think that's like if I think we wouldn't do it as well if it was either of us individually. I think having each other kind of definitely makes that possible.
That's also a great takeaway for the audience of like, because so many, music producers are just like, dudes in a man cave working by themselves. And, just because our career is it happens to be mostly men, but, and it's just like important to see that there are other people doing this. And I've talked about this before, is like, I went to AES one time and I was just like, oh, there are other people that do this. And it's like so important to remember that there's other people and like share music with friends that also do this kind of stuff and make connections and get feedback.
Yeah, and what's kind of, I think we can probably attribute part of our like willingness to do that sort of thing to being so young and like learning with, bigger producers when we were young, because you sort of like, you have to learn how to let go of your own things. Sometimes if you have an idea that you really are attached to, but it doesn't work, sometimes it's hard to like reconcile that. But like, I think us being young and sort of like learning the ropes and probably being put in our place, quite honestly, like a few times of like, hey, like we've tried this a billion times, it's not working, you kind of got to move on, has probably informed all of that too for us. And, like another thing I keep thinking about, we've been doing, it's an ongoing project, but we were working on a record with Susan Cowsill, who is somebody that we've known since I was probably like 12 or 13. Our families are very close, so we're like have this very close relationship. So we kind of approached her about working on some stuff, and so we started in New Orleans, and then did some stuff at Lowot later on, and part of the thing that was so like informative about that is that she was also co-producing, and she wanted to get away from. She's a product of the '60s, where like the records are very kind of expansive. It's the Phil Spector thing, it's the Brian Wilson thing, and she loves all that stuff, and so do we, and so it's really easy to get to just start piling things on and just like layering and layering and layering, and then by the end of the day you're listening back and you're just so fatigued because there's like so much there, where how do you even start sorting through all this, and she kind of came in and was like, I want to go the opposite direction and really resist the urge to do this, and so that was a matter of like trusting each other to keep each other in check, and ultimately I think we landed somewhere in the middle where it wasn't so much like a let's just kind of capture everything live and do kind of sort of like a minimalist approach, but it also wasn't this like massive, sprawling,
overcooked kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. It kind of landed in this like middle ground, which was amazing, and it's